All right, Kyle Zagrodzky, welcome to the Pain and Performance Podcast, my man.
Oh, thank you, doctor. I appreciate you.
Yeah, this is one of the conversations I think I've had a lot more in my office. So I was really excited to get you on and kind of go through this stuff. So we have like a pain and regenerative therapy clinic. So we work a lot on like let's get rid of pain.
Yep.
Let's start getting you back to living. And an interesting thing has happened over the years as we've done that is people are like, hey, I feel better. Now I kind of want to live better. Like now I want to stay healthy and continue moving and being active. How do I get to that point? And one of the things we teach them is something called backcasting. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't heard of backcasting. What's
So
that?
backcasting is basically where you're like, okay, let me go forward to like, if I want to live longer, let me go to my, 90th year and look backwards and see like what did I do to get me there? And then the real powerful thing is when you flip it over and you say like, okay, I did not make it to my 90th year. Why? What things happened? Did I get sick? Did I have an injury? Did I have, an accident of some sort? And so one of the things that comes up during that a lot is people talk about like fractures as they age and bone health, and they saw their parents end up, falling and breaking a hip, and then that leads down a really kind of slippery pathway. And so it's been something that I've gotten like more and more interested in, like how do we at least take that one off of the table? Is like let's make sure with the studies and the research we currently have that I feel like we can get ahead of this. I feel like in the vast majority of cases we can stop you from having a major problem as you age in terms of falls and fractures and bone health.
Yeah, I think in terms of a lot of things, I think me, you, and an army of other longevity experts are focused on this question of what do we do to prevent the preventable, right? There's a lot of things that we can and can't control, mostly can't control in this world. And we could have our plans and our goals and things, and then life happens, and what you end up with is not really what you planned for. And you could say that across the collection of things, but with how we treat our body, how we treat our mind and our thoughts, what we put in our body, those things are within our imminent control. And they ultimately can have a massive effect on the quality of our life, not so much how hard we work, not so much our goals, though those matter. But the quality of life is really about managing your health and your emotions.
Yeah, uh, I think that's I don't know, maybe that gets missed a little bit today with our kind of hard driving, and then we wake up and we're like 65 and we're like, oh crap, I forgot about this thing. I forgot about
Yeah.
this big important part of this.
Yeah, I'm 55 now, and I'm thinking 15 years, I'll be 70. Right? What happened, right?
So y'all are part of the forefront of bone health, at least from the physical side of things. How'd you end up in this field?
So I'm what you would call a bootstrap entrepreneur, have been my whole life, which essentially means I get a business idea, I fund it myself, I drive it. Over since I was really in my 20s to now, I've owned companies that have generated well over $200 million in revenue, employed thousands of people around the world. And I've always been at the foundation of that, I've always had a drive to solve problems. If I'm not solving a problem, then I'm, for whatever reason, I'm just not motivated. It's for just kind of my makeup. And I like it done the way I want it, which is why I'm an entrepreneur. So when I was an employee in my life, I was a great employee, did a great job, always won awards in the top this and the top that. And I'm happy to do that. I love that, doing that kind of thing too. But when I see things that aren't being done the best possible way, it's like fingernails on a chalkboard to me. Um, so my wife and I had one of the things that we'd done in our 20s is we ended up opening up a bunch of gyms. We had 9 gyms at one point, and I started a software company that serviced the gym industry, and uh, and I got bored with it. It just wasn't really. It was making money and doing all the things, and I was just bored out of my mind. And I had a great team that was doing everything they were supposed to be doing. So it was just kind of like, okay, I built it, it's running. Now what?
Right.
And so I wanted to get back into health and wellness, and I thought about starting a gym chain. But there was like at the time there's like 35,000 gyms in the United States, and they're all doing basically the same thing. Now you have boutique specialty gyms and big box gyms and all that kind of thing, but essentially it's a brand wrapped around existing technology that basically has been doing the same thing for the past 40 plus years. And so I thought, well, that's not really solving a problem. The world has enough gyms. I believe in the industry. I know the industry. I know I can do it. It's just I won't get out of bed excited to do that. And I stumbled across this piece of technology that Dr. Jaquish had made, a prototype, listened to a presentation he gave, and I thought, man, he's discovered an industry. This is going to change the world. And I had two feelings at the time. One was fear and one was love. I loved what he created. I thought it was amazing, but I was afraid that no one's going to understand this. No one's going to appreciate this. This is going to end up in the dustbin of history. And yet it's one of the most profound musculoskeletal development systems I have ever seen. So I think I'm the guy. This is what I was made for. So I'm going to take this to the world.
I love it. Was there, it was primarily kind of when they were kind of pitching you, was it the research around the development that got you, or the potential for change? What was that calling, if you will, whenever you were hearing that initial presentation?
It's an intuition kind of thing, and I think people get different into levels of intuitions and downloads and things like that. There wasn't much science behind it at the time, but I saw enough of it. I saw enough pre and post DEXA scans, a handful of those. I saw the results that people were getting in terms of quality of life, pain reduction, strength, balance improving. And the thing that was so sexy about it was that I sat there with my stopwatch on my phone, and I was watching him give this lecture and demonstrating his prototype. He had an old woman who was not very ambulatory, and she had a hard time moving and was overweight and elderly, and it took her like 6.5 minutes to complete a session. So I'm thinking, okay, that's the weakest link in the chain here. But if somebody can do a session in 6.5 minutes going slowly, I can build a business model around this. And you only do it once a week. And you don't get sweat, you don't get sweaty, you don't get fatigued, you're not sore the next day. You could do it in whatever clothes you want, yet you're getting these profound physiological responses that I had never seen before. And everything I knew about the gym industry and fitness and all this kind of thing, I'm like, this is the fountain of youth in this area of human athletic performance, development, sustaining health, all that kind of thing. Like this is one of the major things we're missing.
Yeah, there's a lot in the ability, the access, and I think that's one of the hard things that is always tough on this. Is like once you get to the point where you need better stability and bone health and bone strength, it's hard to do the work to do it. And so like that's the power. Can we make the people who need it most able to do it and have access to it?
Well, I would say that we all need it. There have been a few studies that have published that have shown that by and large, human beings since the 1900s have been steadily decreasing in bone density. And so this leads to all kinds of health problems. There's a linkage between loss of bone density and athletic performance. But more importantly than that is there's a link between low bone density dementia, low bone density type 2 diabetes, low bone density and immune system health. And then you have the obvious, low bone density leads to more fractures, and then fractures, like a hip fracture over the age of 60 or 65, I can't remember the age, but it's not that old, carries a higher 2-year mortality rate than people who have breast cancer. And so and if you do survive after 2 years, for most people, quality of life goes down substantially. So when you look at this declining bone density that we've seen for 125 years, and it's continuing at the rate that we're going, and add to that people who got COVID also had a precipitous drop in bone density, which sparks a lot of rabbit trail types of questions of what other types of COVID-related viruses or other types of viruses or illnesses contribute to bone loss as well. That aside, we are looking at a point in, I would say, the next 50, 100 years where we as a race can't sustain itself. And so there's a lot of really amazing things coming out of the longevity movement, wellness movement, biohacking, whatever you want to call it, that lengthen telomeres, that reduce inflammation, that improve your immune system, improve your gut health, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're not dealing with bone density and muscle strength, then that will be your undoing. And it's really sad, as anybody who's known somebody who's fractured a spine or a hip, they could have their brain, they could be taking care of themselves and doing all the things, and then that one event spirals them down to the end, and it's horrible. Especially we have a woman who was a power lifter, and she's now in her 50s, like a high performance athlete. She's 58 years old, has osteoporosis. So the idea that exercise builds bone is a fallacy. It is extremely hard to build bone density with traditional weight training and traditional exercise. You can influence it, you could slow it, you may have a slight uptick if you're a high performance athlete, but building bone is extremely hard to do. It requires a lot of force, and it's been proven with research. How much force it actually takes to trigger osteogenesis, or to put it another way, the development of new bone.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about that. Can you explain a little bit for people listening, like the idea that bone is like a living tissue, that it is remodeling and rebuilding? Can you kind of go into that a little bit so that people can understand what's going on with
your
it?
entire body is constantly rebuilding itself. The body you live in today is not the body you had 7 years ago. In fact, bone is the slowest tissue that turns over, but all your tissue turns over. And so for that reason, how you treat your body today is the body you're going to get in the future. And you can change that decision at any point, right? You start taking yourself today, and you'll notice massive changes in a few months as your body, as the more quicker turnover tissues replace themselves, and your bone is the longest one, the longest pole in the tent. It takes about 7 years to replace your skeletal system. But it is definitely a living tissue. You've got 3 different types of cells in your bones. You've got osteoblasts, which build up bone, osteoclasts, which basically take away the calcium out of your bone, and you need both. And you have osteocytes, which are the older bone tissue that maintains the matrix of the bone, and is constantly turning over. So everything in our body, except for the minerals that we use, really are living things.
Yeah. For whenever we're looking at how much like bone density you had, you mentioned a DEXA scan. That's kind of our gold standard for some of the measurements on this stuff. What would we be looking at if somebody's listening to this and they've had a DEXA scan or they need one? What would the results be looking like in terms of numbers? What are they looking at, and what makes sense in terms of osteopenia versus osteoporosis? When do they need to kind of really start paying attention to that?
That's a beautiful question. So the standard, they call it the gold standard of measuring bone density, is called a DEXA scan, and it's dual X-ray absorptiometer. And what it does is it sends out a low and a high level form of X-ray radiation, and it will basically, depending on how much radiation comes back off the bone, determines the density of the bone. And you'll get 2 different scores from that scan. You'll get a T score or a Z score. And essentially what that is it's comparing your bone density to that of a healthy 30-year-old of your same race and gender. Because 30 is considered where peak bone mass is, and any deviation off the peak bone mass will give you a score, and that score will be represented as a positive or negative number. So a -1 T score would be comparing your bone density to your 30-year-old self, and it would be your one standard deviation lower than you were at the age of 30 or likely were at the age of 30. And a Z-score is how you compare to people of your same gender, race, and age. So I'm 55 years old, I mentioned. So if I had a -1 T-score, for instance, I would, and a 0 Z-score, that would mean that I'm kind of where a 55-year-old man is supposed to be. If, however, I had a -2 T-score and a -2 Z-score, that would mean I'm 2 standard deviations lower than somebody my age. And the reason why that's important is because there are other things that could affect bone density, and it could be a telltale sign of other problems like hypothyroidism, low testosterone, poor nutrition, these kinds of things. Cancer can, other types of medication can influence bone density. So you want to know both scores. So osteopenia is kind of a term that was ascribed to people that were pre-osteoporosis. So osteoporosis would be designated by a -2.5 T-score. That means you're 2.5 standard deviations lower than healthy 30-year-old bone. A -2, between -2 and -4, -2.4, would be considered osteopenia, which is basically pre-osteoporosis. I think the term was probably assigned so they would have an excuse to start prescribing medication. The primary class of medication in the pharmaceutical medication available is called a bisphosphonate. A bisphosphonate is a class of drug, and there are many different brands, Fosamax, Boniva, Prolia, these kinds of things you might have heard of or even be taking. Those are designed to essentially cause premature cell death of your osteoclast cells. And if you remember what I just stated, osteoclast cells are the cells responsible for breaking down bone. Now, your body needs that for different reasons I think we'll discuss here in a moment. But the theory being, hey, if your bone's not breaking down as fast, then you'll essentially accumulate more bone density in the outer layer of your bone, because your bone grows from the inside out. Yeah. It doesn't affect the inside density of your bone, but just the outside cortical layer of bone density will get harder. The challenge with bisphosphonate drugs is you should not take a bisphosphonate more than a few years. And the reason why is that the side effects start getting worse. I have seen many times where a person's been prescribed bisphosphonates for 10, 15 years, and the doctor just gives them a different brand of bisphosphonate every few years, thinking, okay, well, I can't give you Boniva, now I'll give you Prolia. Oh, I can't give you Prolia, now I'll give you Fosamax or whatever. And you're still taking bisphosphonate. The side effects still continue to increase, and they could be pretty severe. And so it's not really an effective solution. And the fractures that can happen after been taking a bisphosphonate for some time can be pretty devastating. They'll cause your bone to shatter in many cases, as opposed to just a fracture.
Yeah, thank you. Perfect overview. I get a lot of people who are trying to kind of figure this stuff out. And I think one of the questions that we get a lot is like, when should we start getting screened for this? When should we start getting DEXA scans? What's your thought on that?
Well, DEXA scans are not my favorite. I mean, they're not that accurate. They're okay. There's been improvements in technology to give a more accurate scan in recent years, but the really challenge with that is that Medicare used to reimburse like $250 for a DEXA scan back in the 90s and early 2000s, and that slowly scaled back. Now it's like $35 a scan. As such, the doctor doesn't have a business model whereby they could justify upgrading to a scanner that's more accurate. And so there's a business reasons why that technology is not becoming more ubiquitous. The question really comes down to, like, I had somebody come in the early days of Osteostrong, ask me, should I get a bone density scan? I said, it's not really should you get a bone density scan, it's what are you willing to do about it if your bone density is low? because if you're willing to take medication, then yeah, go get a bone density scan. If you're not, then it matters, but only from my opinion to know, just to get a baseline to see if you're improving or declining. And so I'd had a bone density scan like 8 or 9 years ago, and it was like negative zero .8 or -1, which was kind of where it was supposed to be, for maybe a little bit lower than where it was supposed to be for somebody who was my age. But last I checked, it was a +1, which is one standard deviation over a healthy 30-year-old male, which is very awesome. That's like the bone density of a professional 25-year-old rugby player.
Yeah.
I'll take that at 55 years old any day. So you can do something about it, but there are three things that generally contribute to bone density. Foundationally, hormones. So if you have hypothyroidism, low testosterone, these things could certainly influence bone density. And nutrition. So it's the obvious things. It's vitamin D3, K2, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, those elements that make up bone. And you can have your hormones and your nutrition in order. But the challenge is that if you're not stimulating your body to grow bone, it just simply doesn't do it, or does it, or you're basically just slowing down the rate of loss, which is good.
Yeah.
That it's like taking protein, sufficient amounts of protein, and never working out. You're just not going to develop big muscles. You have to create the stimulus. So your body's built with these natural adaptive responses that when you change your environment or you stimulate it, your body will respond and give you an outcome. And so are you stimulating it to do bad things or good things? You eat a bucket of French fries, you're stimulating it to store fat. And toxins and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, that I want to dive, like, what happens whenever we go in to stimulate that, and like what are the best ways to do that in terms of activities. One of the things I wanted to mention, because I've seen this online, is where people were like basically saying like getting your bone density test was, this dangerous thing because of the amount of radiation that was coming from it. Last I checked, like the modern DEXA scans were like almost at minimum equivalent to getting just your standard X-ray in terms of how much radiation you were dealing with. So
you'll get the equivalent amount of radiation from a DEXA scan to eating like 2 bananas. So a DEXA scan uses very low. That's why like even the technician that administers a DEXA scan is not wearing a lead apron. So it's really low. There's a new scanner that was invented in Italy called Echolite. I think it's a superior scan. Several of our franchisees have bought them. And it's cool because it uses ultrasound. Now, there have been ultrasound scanners around for decades, but the results they give are even worse than a DEXA scan. Just because they don't work very well. But what these brilliant scientists figured out is that when you hit bone with an ultrasound frequency, the frequency that comes off the bone can be measured, and it will tell you the density more accurately than a DEXA scan. And a DEXA scan will simply measure the outside layer of the bone. Most of them will. There are some advanced machines that will do both inside and outside the bone, but most of them out there now just do the outside layer of the bone, or the cortical bone, which is great if you're selling pharmaceuticals, because that's the density. That's the layer. That's
That's usually how it works.
That's the layer that bisphosphonates affect. But an Echolite will measure the inside, which is called the trabecular bone, the outside, the cortical bone, and will give you the tensile strength of your bone, or a FRAX score that essentially tells you what your chances are of fracturing. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of that. They don't have like a kind of a conversion to like T and Z scores, or does it still?
They do. They give you a T and Z score, and so T and Z scores, I think, were pretty good measurement systems.
Yeah.
Of just determining your density based upon 30-year-old plus people you compare to. That's smart.
So let's dive into kind of some of the maybe like lifestyle factors affecting bone health. So you mentioned kind of, it's hard to stimulate bone with actual exercise or anything like that. I was trying to pull up like the different activities people could do that and what their impacts on bone health would be. What was the research around some of that stuff? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sure thing. So there was a guy by the name of Dr. Kevin Deere in 2012 out of Bristol, United Kingdom, published a study with this to address the specific question of how much force is needed on the bone to trigger osteogenesis. And so he had a very clever idea. Hats off to this guy. He attached accelerometers to the hips of the subjects. There was over 700 subjects that completed the study, and he measured the amount of impact force that they endured through their hip joint, and expressed it in terms of multiples of their body weight, which I thought was very clever because it stands to reason that a 200-pound person would require more force than a 100-pound person. So multiples of body weight as an expression of force on that individual made sense. And what he discovered is what I call the boiling point of water as it comes to triggering osteogenesis. What he found is that the only subjects that were able to generate osteogenesis were ones that experienced a minimum of 4.2 multiples of their body weight through their hip joint. And so if you're sitting here and you're thinking, okay, well, how much do I weigh? And multiply that times 4.2, you're going to realize very quickly that weight-bearing activity doesn't get you there. Even like the guy that set the world record on powerlifting did like over 1,300 pounds, which is ridiculous. But this guy weighed like 500 pounds or 400 something pounds. Like he was huge and a beast. And if you do the math, he didn't trigger enough to build bone density.
Yeah, if you're moving 3x your body weight in a squat, you're moving some serious weight.
Yeah, you're moving some serious weight. And so the amount of force you needed could only be triggered through impact, or what we do at Osteostrong, which is emulating impact force. So it's experiencing the force of impact without the impact. So it's very safe on your joints. In fact, it strengthens your joints. And so what you can do, I mean, jumping, sprinting could help, but sprinting really only has an impact of around 2 multiples of your body weight, and you can jump, but if you have to jump pretty high. Dr. Jaquish created an app called Fracture Proof that utilizes the accelerometer in your smartphone, and you hold it tight after you're entering in your body weight. You hold it tightly against your hip, then you jump on the ground as hard as you can to see whether or not you're capable of doing that. It's a lot harder to do than you think, and it kind of hurts a little bit. I tried it. I was even jumping off a countertop over there onto a concrete floor to see if I could do it, and I couldn't, because you're built with shock absorbers called knees and hips, and they flex when you hit the ground, even if you try not to. And so it's hard to create a level of force that can do that. Now, there have been studies that have shown that really heavy weightlifting can slow and even increase bone density. That's kind of overall bone density, not as much through your hips, but through your more peripheral bones like your wrists and things like that, which is good. I'm not saying don't exercise, but if you're exercising with the intent of building bone density, it's not really doing that.
So whenever we look at kind of the impact stuff, and that was the things that started to pop out, was like, you look at people who train, not surprisingly, seem to have slower loss of bone. People who do resistance training, people who do any form of jumping or calisthenics had slower loss of bone. But to actually reverse that I think goes to what you're saying, that was where it was like, it is really hard to actually get your body to increase and build bone. Some of these activities, I'm with you 100%. Keep doing them. If you're not doing them, get started. They will help you in, every way you can think.
You can slow bone density loss by lifting heavy weights, and we can see an example of this. Your body will eat itself if you're not using it, right? It'll eat the bone. Like there's a lot of nutrients in bone that your body wants, but will seek them elsewhere if you're using it. And we see this. So you see this with muscle. You see this with bone. But you see this too when astronauts are in outer space. Like those 2 astronauts stuck in outer space right now. Those people are screwed. they're going to have a precipitous drop in bone density and muscle density. You can lose about 10 years of bone density in 1 month of weightlessness. So it shows you that example will show you that when you're not putting pressure on your bones, or that you're going to lose it faster. And so doing heavy weightlifting will certainly help slow that process down for sure. But building it's a game changer. Not only is it like, hey, I'm going to prevent fractures, but I could tell you in my life at 55 years old, me at 40 years old, 15 years ago, was 35 pounds heavier than I am now. I suffered from decades of chronic joint and back pain. I used to get migraine headaches every other week, was taking 15 to 20 Advil a week just to get through my week and survive. Chiropractors and massage therapists, I couldn't have made it without them. And so thank God for them, because they're the only people that could just, okay, now I can function. When I started Osteostrong, it was about 6 or 7 sessions that my joint and back pain was gone. And I didn't even realize it until I was on a long flight and I was coming down for a landing, and the flight attendant said, move your seat to upright position. And after like 3 or 4 hours on this plane, I didn't even recline my seat. I'd even forgotten to get up. And that would have been a guaranteed migraine for me, just sitting down that long. So I was like, wait, my back doesn't hurt anymore. And then I was like, wait, my right hip doesn't hurt anymore. My knees aren't cracking anymore as I go up. Wait, what happened? Right? Pain has a short memory. Right. And so it wasn't until I realized it was gone and I get to tell this story that I'm reminded of who I used to be. And then when my strength started coming back, because I couldn't go to the gym, because going to the gym and lifting weights meant migraine headache. And I was a super athlete when I was in my early 20s. And so that was always very frustrating for me. It was like, I can't take care of me the way that I know how because I'm in pain. And it messes with your emotions, it messes with your outlook, and you don't even realize it until I was out of it. And then as soon as I was out of the pain and my physical strength was coming back quickly, then my outlook started changing. I started becoming more positive about the future. And then I got more excited about taking care of my body than I'd done. I look younger now at 55 than I did when I was 40, and I feel a hell of a lot better. So increasing your bone density is a massive game changer, not only fracture prevention, but pain. And then the way we do it, it increases physical strength substantially, and balance improvements we see are off the chain. But athletic performance is also greatly impacted. I've never seen an athlete not start breaking their own personal records after 5 sessions at Osteostrong.
Can we go into that? Like how is it mimicking the impact? Like how's that work?
That is a beautiful question. So imagine I'm doing a bench press and the bar is on my chest. At that position, I have the least amount of leverage possible, meaning I'm weak as my weakest range of motion that we would call it. Yeah. As I push that bar off my chest, I start to get exponentially stronger because my leverage improves. Yeah. At the apex of about 120-degree angle of inclusion, I've got about 7 times more strength in that range of motion. We call that our strong range of motion than I do with the bar on my chest. And so the idea was, hey, if we could start them in their strong range of motion without any weight and they just self-impose force, can they create a sufficient amount of force to stimulate bone density? And so what the Osteostrong devices are designed to do is to help you get into the most biomechanically optimal position to generate a high level of force. Then it locks into position. You impose force in that position for about 10 seconds, and you will try to get to a maximum level of force production. So you're looking at a screen that's giving you instantaneous real-time feedback of force. And then when you hit your peak force, you hold it for a second or two, and then you slowly ease out of it, and that's it. Now, it seems simple, like because it only takes 10 seconds, your heart rate's not even getting up. That's why you don't get fatigued. Your only goal at Osteostrong is to emulate a level of force sufficient to trigger that natural adaptive response that tells your central nervous system, start building bone, muscle, and ligament and tendon density. And so when you start getting density in those three systems within your body, I mean, it's a game changer. It's an absolute game changer. And because of the way we do it, you can't be moving while you're imposing that level of force. You'll be surprised at not only, and I think you've done a session
Yeah.
as well, how much force you could generate, which is crazy. You're like, is this even possible? And then number two, like even elderly people, I have a woman in her mid 60s who weighed about 115 pounds and posing like 1,200 pounds of force on her lower extremities. And I'm having a conversation with her, and she's not in pain, and she just comes out of it. She goes, "Is that good enough?" Because I was just trying to take a picture for our presentation. I'm like, "That's perfect, Lisa."
The
And so,
gamification of it is also really good because so I was speaking at a breakout session and y'all had a booth there. And we were standing there doing it, and like, obviously this is at a conference, so everybody's lined up and you're doing it. But to see the force, like there's a game in there that you're kind of like, okay, I want, like, hold on, let me do it again. Hang on, let me do it again. Hang on, let me do it again. I was like, for something that can be that powerful, that people found fun, for lack of a better term. They're like, this is not unpleasant in any way.
no,
Jumping off the counter, like you talked about, doesn't sound terribly pleasant to me.
no, it isn't. It hurt because I was trying to do it. Like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
So yeah, the gamification's part of it. And of course, the fitness industry has tried to gamify the experience of fitness in so many different ways because people don't want to do fitness. It goes against our DNA to willfully engage in physical activity. People don't realize that. This is the reason why people join gyms on January 1st and quit by January 31st. It's nothing wrong with them. They're just behaving the way they're genetically designed, which is to conserve and consume calories. Willfully burning calories is not anything any living organism wants to do. Even a tiger will get fat if you just feed it and it never has to hunt. So when I see an overweight person, they're just doing what they are supposed to do biologically, consume and conserve calories.
Yeah.
So it's hard to do. With Osteostrong, you're not really burning calories while you're there. That's not the reason why you're there. Now, it will enhance it will recondition your metabolism because when you increase the density of your muscle cells, you're increasing your insulin receptors. It's basically metabolic reconditioning when you're going there. So if you're trying to lose weight, it will definitely help you. But if you're not trying to lose weight, it's hard to tell. Like we've had people who've been members for a year or two, and like, my clothes are starting to fit looser. It's like, well, you're processing glucose better.
Yeah.
But it's not like going to be a rapid weight loss system. It'll help you keep it off. But it's easy. It's fun. We see, and this will freak you out because I came from the gym industry and we owned a lot of gyms, of course. And then we see our members, like 90 to 100% of our members every single week at every Osteostrong around the world. And from guy from the gym industry, where's my background was, I was like, what the heck? Like we have to do backflips and make this place a freaking party and spotlessly clean and open these super long hours just to get people to come here. And on our busiest day of the month, we might see 35% of our members. But when I started Osteostrong, I was like, what the heck's going on here? Like it was beautiful because you're going to get an outcome. And so that's it's the gamification, but I think more than that is human beings aren't burning calories when they go to an Osteostrong, which doesn't go against your genetic makeup.
Yeah. How have y'all done studies like when somebody's going through this, what kind of hormonal response are they getting? Are you getting a spike in growth hormone? What's happening on that front? Have y'all looked at that?
We haven't tested that yet. We have several studies that are in peer review right now, very large studies. One of them is going to be presented Saturday in Toronto at a large conference. The abstract from that one's got 190 subjects in it. And they didn't look at hormone changes. So my guess is that it has an effect on hormone levels, but probably not as much as resistance training. It's just a theory. I don't know.
I was, this is really funny. So this is how my mind works. I'm a like stacker. And so whenever I was talking at the conference, we've used something in our office called Katsu. Are you familiar with Katsu?
I'm familiar with Katsu.
And their whole thing is like, let's just skip to the hormone change, right? And then I walk from their little area, and y'all are like right next door to it. And people are like, let's get to the force production so that you can actually create change at the cellular level. And I was like, man, let's put these together. Let's throw some Katsu bands on somebody so you're getting the growth hormone change while you increase the force production. I was like, y'all's boots need to be next door to each other. But I'm like, how powerful can that be if we stack the changes that need to happen together? So you were talking about the key nutrients and stuff that are needed for that. Have y'all? I know y'all have done a bunch of studies. I'm just trying to kind of get caught up. How much do you think somebody could change if we said, let's test all your micronutrients, let's test your hormone levels, let's get that stuff in a good place, and let's start adding in an Osteostrong session a week? Like, how much do you think you could change this?
Huge, absolutely. So if somebody goes to Osteostrong, not 100% of our members get results in bone density. And if they don't, it's 90, I'm guessing, about 98% of the time it's hormonal and or nutritional. So if you can, and people don't get enough protein, so it's protein, it's the right kind of calcium, which would be preferably a plant-derived form of calcium, like from algae or leafy green vegetables, that kind of thing. Calcium, vitamin D3, boron, magnesium, phosphorus. I'm probably missing a few in here. But those are all micronutrients that build up on it. If you get those things in place, your hormones, protein, and micronutrients, that's a massive game changer. If you're doing Kaiatsu, if you're doing resistance training and Osteostrong, the changes will be profound. If you just did that for 90 days, people wouldn't recognize you. It happens that fast. And I know you've seen it. I've seen that change in my life. Add to that, like the only other, like people always ask me, well, what do you do? What do you do? Well, I do a lot, but if I were to just do a few things, I would do resistance training with latex bands, like heavy bands, like the X3 bar or Harambe or something like that. I would do Osteostrong, and I would do intermittent fasting. Um, like I only eat one meal a day now. It's very rare that I have 2 meals a day. And then about once a week, not once a week, about every 2 weeks, I'll do a 48-hour fast. And then once a year, I'll do a 5-day fast. I hate those. But your chances of getting cancer drop
Way
down
down.
by like 90% if you're doing a 5-day fast once a year.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things you could do, but yeah, the changes are so profound and so fast. It's like we all want we all want instantaneous gratification, but 3 months of doing that, like you can do that. You can do that. Like and you'll start seeing it's not like 3 months, nothing happens. The change is there. And when you take the proper measurements, like I believe very much, Tim Ferriss taught me this in Tools of Titans, that book he wrote years ago. Take a before picture. You're going to regret it if you don't, because it enables you to go back and see who you were. And that motivates the crap out of you. It's like, damn, I used to look like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, hey, I can dedicate 15 minutes of effort a day to my body. So I work here in my man cave office. And so like I didn't get a chance to do my workout today because we had our podcast this morning and all the things I got to do for travel and whatever. I won't go upstairs until I do my resistance training. I just won't do it. I don't get to eat. I don't get to go upstairs. I don't get to talk to my wife. Nothing. I have to do
Yeah.
this, and that's just kind of a commitment I make to myself, and it gets done.
Yeah, but
15
I
minutes.
think so. So there's every year for about let's say probably 7 years now. I've had a group of friends that does the 100-day challenge. It's the last 100 days of the year. So we're 4 days into this right now. There's 96 days left as we record this in 2024. And basically what we do is we say like, you're going to pick a habit that you're going to do for 100 days straight. And this started in a really weird way to make it really short. We had a friend who was trying to put off a big business activity. He was like, I'll do it next year. The year's almost over. And we were like, dude, there's 100 days left in the year. Do this every day. And like, let's talk at the end of the year. And this has snowballed into, now we've got hundreds of people around the world who join our 100-day challenge. And it's really fun to see. But last year I did exactly what you're talking about. I was like, I'm going to change my routine up and start working out in the morning. I was always an evening person. And I was like, the other thing I'm going to do is take a picture every day. Like, I'm going to take a starting picture, but then I'm going to snap a picture every day. And it's so fun to do that because you're like, by day 5, like nothing has happened. You're like, I don't know if I see a whole lot. By day 10, you're like, maybe. Day 30, you're like, there's stuff there. When you go back and do like a speed through thing on those things for 100 days, so just over the 3-month mark, it's crazy what happens in that amount of time with consistency. It doesn't take a lot. I was doing 15 to 30 minutes depending on the day. I didn't have any time restriction. I was like, if I do 5 minutes and to me that's a workout, count it. And so it's like that consistency that your body keeps getting that signal and keeps getting that signal. It's like, okay, he's going to do this every week. Let's go.
Well, most of your cells in your body have turned over in 100 days. So whatever you're doing right now, you've got basically a new body except for your bone. And so it's like, it's massive. So good for you. I like that.
What's the frequency of doing this? Where did that come from? How did we know that, look, you can do this like once a week and it's enough stimulus to make the change?
Yeah, well, you'll know this, and the best analogy I can give you is with muscle, you don't work out the same muscle group every day because it has to recover, rebuild. Protein synthesis takes like 36 to 40 hours, and so you don't want to be working out the same muscle group every day because you're going to get diminishing returns on that effort. You're not going to get the result that you want. Your cardiovascular system, it needs recovery time too, but it's much shorter. It's like 8 hours. And then your bone, because it's a much more dense material, requires about a week to recover and rebuild and all that kind of stuff. So you're building bone after an Osteostrong session latently for we think for about 30 days, but the recovery period's about a week.
Gotcha. I think that's the thing that I heard you talk about it on one of your podcasts where you were like, look, I think our biggest hurdle is that people don't believe that this is possible to happen this fast and in this small amount of work. So we have to like show them like this is real, that you can make these changes in like how long does somebody shows up at an Osteostrong clinic? How long's the workout? How long are they there for?
If they're in a hurry, they can get out of there in about 6 or 7 minutes, but most people hang out for about 15, 18 minutes. Because they want to engage in red light therapy or some of the other modalities that we have there.
And so you're doing like all like that gets you a full body, right?
For what it is that we do, absolutely. Yeah. You can't do, and there's only 4 different exercises on the Osteostrong devices that you'll do. Each one takes 10 or 15 seconds. You spend more time getting up, walking to the next machine, sitting down, and having the technician move you in the right position than you do actual exercise. So yeah, it's very efficient system.
Is this one of those things where like more is not better? Do y'all have people who are like, okay, I've gone through it, but let me go through it again?
Sure. So more is not better, unfortunately. And most people are like going, especially high achievers, like, wait a second, that's all I have to do and I'm going to get this outcome. Can't I just come in I want to get it faster. Well, you can only grow tissue at a certain rate, right? You can't get it to grow any faster. So it doesn't work. And it's a paradigm we have that's been ground into our brains. Really started in the 80s where they would say, that your sweat is your fat cells crying as you're burning them off. You no pain, no gain, this kind and you could say that for a lot of training of muscle fibers for athletic performance and things like that. But I'm only interested in the outcome. Like if I want to be stronger, if I want strong bones, if I want to lose weight, like what is the most efficient way for me to get there? Because I just want to go live my life. I don't want a lifestyle change. I just want to freaking live my life. So when I first started this company, one of the guys I hired on my executive team, he kept saying, "Oh, this is a lifestyle business." I'm like, "No, it isn't. This isn't a lifestyle. I don't want to change anybody's lifestyle. Go live whatever lifestyle you want. I want to enable that lifestyle."
Yeah.
Right.
For you mentioned kind of like the red light stuff. What are some of the other? We talked about kind of diet. We talked about nutrition and medication, and I think the activity part. What are some of those little kind of the health hackers things that can maybe help this out a little bit? You mentioned infrared. I know there's been
Red
quite a
and
few
near
on that.
red and near infrared. The problem with most red light therapy systems in the world is they just don't penetrate much beyond skin deep. They can stimulate your own production of collagen, which makes up everything.
Yeah.
It's all over your body. It's your bone, your skin, your fingernails. It's like in everything. It's the stretchy tensile strength protein, I guess is what you would call it.
Have you
So,
dug into
but most
PEMF at all?
Yeah, yeah. So we have PMF mats at Osteostrong. So PMF can stimulate osteoblastic activity as well as improve micro circulation, and you need that. Like I have one in my bed. I turn it on at night. It has a setting on it that goes off in the middle of the night, and then it goes off about 20 minutes before I wake up in the morning. So huge believer in red light therapy, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, which is PMF you're referring to, are probably two of my favorite hacks. There's other things that we do there as well, but if you're doing Osteostrong, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, and red light therapy, I think you should do PMF and red light every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That would be great. If we do that, throw in this once a week. Kyle, this is awesome, man. I love y'all's commitment to like actually studying the effects of this. There's so many companies out that have like kind of, quote unquote new like advanced technology, and yet they're almost on the other end. They kind of like don't really want the research to come out and like, no, just
Well,
buy our stuff.
it's also very expensive to do research outside of like, I mean, pharmaceutical companies and government grants to universities for different things they want to research. If you're funding it yourself, it's freaking expensive. So I've spent roughly $1 million on 3 studies in 2019, and then COVID derailed them. And then they had to come back up, and I had to put more money into it to restart them, and then they just got done. So that was 2019 to now. They're just now in peer review. So not only does it take a long time, it's very expensive. We do it because we've got a number of goals and missions for our company, but one of them is to be one of the most innovative wellness brands in the world, which means you have to freaking innovate.
Yeah.
So we filed patents on new technology that we've created. We're funding research to make sure that it's the most efficacious way. And we have a philosophy that Tony Robbins taught me, which is fall more in love with your customer than you do your product or service. Because if you fall more in love with your product or service, then you do everything to convince people to do a thing that may not be the best thing for them. If you're open to what I just love this person, what's the best thing for them, then it creates an emotional state in your mind that allows you to let go of something you're holding on to in favor of the person you're serving. And so that's been our mantra. And we don't want to overly fall in love with our technology. If there's something better, we'll do it. Right.
Yeah.
And so we're always looking for how do we make this better? So that's kind of my demented brain. Like, how can I fix this? How do I make it better? How do I solve this problem? I'm maniacal about that.
We are kin on that front. My staff, if they're listening to this, is going to be like, "Oh yeah, y'all are the same person." I love it. One of the questions we ask all of our guests, Kyle, is if somebody's listening to this and they can do one thing today to improve their health, what would that one thing be?
Intermittent fasting and eat one meal a day, high protein, no carbs, stay away from sugar. You'll have the most rapid health outcome. That would be the one thing that I would recommend. It's the cheapest thing you could do. In fact, you'll save money.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, so this is something that everybody can do. I mean, my gosh, your weight loss and the way that you feel and the clarity that your brain will work, your immune system will function better. You'll age slower. It's the hands down easiest thing to do. So it'd be my recommendation. Intermittent fast, anybody can do it.
I love that. Where can people find you? Where can they follow Osteostrong? Where can they get more information about where to access some of this stuff?
So osteostrong.me is our website, and you can find all the locations they want there. We just opened up our 14th country, so we've got 200 locations. We just inked a deal with 10X Health Systems, Grant Cardone, Gary Brecka, Brandon Dawson, those guys. And so we just made a big announcement on that. So we're doing some massive things in this space, and our general philosophy is we're going to do everything we can to support everybody in this space, even if they're acting like their competition or saying, just things that are inappropriate in the space out or not scientifically efficacious. If it does a thing and it helps a person, then we've all got to row in the same direction. And every time somebody goes to you or to me or to iCryo or wherever, their universe just got a little bit bigger. They start realizing that they are the CEO of their own health. And the more people that think that way, the rising tide lifts all ships. And we have a massive mission. We are a sick, dying population. We have more chronic diseases in the United States than any other country in the world. We're the sickest population in the country. Everybody around the world is declining in bone density. Our quality of nutrition sucks. And it's people like you, people like me, and I could list off 100 other people that are pushing against this with both fists. And so I'm just grateful that you had me on this podcast. I'm hoping that I was able to serve you and everybody listening. And if you want to be a part of Osteostrong, you want to join our team, or you want to just participate, please visit us. Let us know, because we would love to talk to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the passionate, the brilliant Kyle Zagrodzky. Thank you, man.
Thank you, Derek. I appreciate you.